use your grown-up voices and your grown-up vocabulary and all that kind of stuff. Again, this is Scott Bryan from Southeast Florida, actually in the Fort Lauderdale area, and he is going to be presenting to us things to avoid, because a lot of you know my story. I learned the hard way. Don't go doing snow angels in mango tree sawdust. All right, and it ended up putting me in the emergency room twice on one single operation. So I decided, well, shoot, maybe other people should learn about this mango tree madness and all the other stuff in Florida that wants to kill you. So Scott, the floor is yours, sir, and we will open it up to questions. And Scott, I'll let you, if you want to take questions as we go on the fly, or if you want me to kind of monitor the chat, I'm here for you. You just tell me how you want to roll the show, and we'll go with your lead here, boss. All right.
I'm great with having questions as we go. If we don't get too bogged down in it, otherwise we'll have to shorten it so I can get enough information in. But
Sounds
I think
like
going along, if somebody has a question at that moment, I think we should address that, because that question probably applies to several individuals, not just the one who got their hand up first. So, sound good?
I like it.
Okay. Are we ready?
Sir? Yes, sir. The floor is yours.
So we're going to start out with, I am down in South Florida. I'm a native down here, but I have traveled extensively up the southeast coast, up into Canada, crossed the south over into Texas, Oklahoma, all the way out into California, up the west coast. I haven't been doing much in the middle of the country and the Great Plains and that sort of thing, for all you people who are out there in those states, the Midwest and that sort of thing. But luckily for you, you live in some of the best places not to get into any trouble with too many plants that are there. One of the things that you find is that the more temperate an area is, the more cold weather you get, the less plants need the defenses of these toxins to protect themselves. Down here where I am, it's subtropical. If we get 3 days that are actually cool during the year, we call that Christmas, and that's it. So everything that's down here can survive, every bug, everything. We're basically different from Lake Okeechobee down in the middle of our state, down to the bottom of the Keys at the lower part of Florida. We're kind of different than any place else in the U.S. Having said that, for those of you who might be anywhere, because Justin said we had some people from kind of all over the country, and that's great. We're going to be talking about a few different things. One of the big ones is poison ivy. Everybody's heard of that. Poison oak, poison sumac. And the reason we're going to talk about those is because if you take those three, they grow in every state in the continental U.S. If you don't want those to be involved, you got to go to Alaska or Hawaii. So pretty much wherever you are, you're going to have to deal with something in that family. So we're going to talk about those quite a bit. We're going to talk about some other things. We're going to talk about if you happen to be coming down towards South Florida or in other regions, you might run into some things, and some of the things that Mother Nature might try to tell you about a plant, whether you want to avoid it or not, because there's some factors you can look for, be wary of, and that sort of thing. And one of the problems with a class like this, I know a lot of the people who join in for these things are the chainsawers, or you're responding to other things where I could teach you to identify a plant, hold up a leaf, and you'll learn that. And if you live in the area or whatever, you can get your little ID book out and find it. But guess what? That plant doesn't look the same after a flood, a hurricane, or a tornado. It may not have any leaves. It might be busted all across. It might have the bark stripped off of it. So if you're looking for those characteristics, there certainly aren't any flowers left on it, which is how we actually botanically identify plants. So if you can't have the regular earmarks that we look for and know the copycats that might be in an area or somewhere else, then you have to kind of go by some more general information. We're going to get into that, how to apply that to somebody who's working out in some area that's been heavily impacted and not out in the garden or going to visit their aunt and uncle up north or whatever you're doing. So we'll start out with a few things. Let me think. So Mother Nature, one of the things she does in a lot of places is she gives you bright colors. Everybody see that? There's a lovely little plant called oyster plant down here. It's dark green on the top of the leaves and it's dark purple on the bottom. Usually if you start seeing purples and reds, bright oranges and things on plants and it's not fall wherever you live, if you get fall, that's an indicator that this plant might be a problem. This is a common weed down here. They're an invasive species. We try to kill them off. They still plant them in the landscape industry, so we're fighting a losing battle. But these are a skin irritant to a lot of people. Most of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight is about skin irritation because that's going to be the contact that you guys are going to be getting into. Hopefully you're not out there picking plants you don't know and trying to eat a piece of it and find out if it's any good after the storm. Don't do that. So skin irritant, it's an eye irritant. So the sap in here can be a problem. Some people it's mild, other people, unless you've happened to find out by testing it out on your own, you don't know how bad it's going to affect you.
Is anyone saying the presentation? Because I'm not seeing a thing except it's a big S in my screen.
That's all I have too.
No, I can see it.
I can see it.
I see Scott.
I see it as well.
I can sit here fine.
I can't see anything.
If you can't see, try to close out and come back in. I know that works for
Yes.
some people.
That's what I was just going to say. Thank you.
No, someone can see it and hear it.
Oh, there you
You're good to go, Scott. We'll let them
Okay.
come back in. Yep.
And there's a lot of little ground covers and everything down here. A lot of them have that dark purple leaf somewhere on them. That's a good indicator. Another skin irritant. And these are ground covers. So if it's all ripped up, you're cleaning an area out, you got dozers or something working and you guys are helping move material around. If this stuff's in the pile and you got short sleeves on your shirt and you're picking this stuff up all day long in the heat, you're might have a problem with that.
Can you please hold that back up?
This one, the little one?
Yeah.
It's kind of a hard one to get because it's not that big, but it's a good indicator that that bottom on those leaves, you can see that dark purple,
Yeah.
which we put it in for landscaping because that color looks great. But if you're out there digging it up or working in the landscape with it, go ahead.
Can you hold up the first one again, please?
First one, yep. The oyster plant, it's called oyster plant. Here we go. So it's purple on the bottom, green on top, but that bright purple is that indicator what you want to look for. And unfortunately, a lot of these things, even if they start to dry out, if it's been a couple weeks or something since the storm and you've got trash piles laying around, they're still, because they're used to living through our drier season down here. That's kind of a weird thing in South Florida, but we do have a wet season and a dry season. We only get a third of our rain in the dry season. So, but a lot of these things have root nodules that hold on to that moisture, like a potato or something like that, that can fall back in the fall and then come back up in the spring. They have a way to help and hold that water. So even though you've torn it up and it's over there in a pile and everything, that doesn't mean a week later you go over there and start digging through it again. You still can't contaminate yourself and get a breakout from it. Okay. So another thing, and gets into be a problem when we talk about IDing plants, most people, when they want an ID a plant, they bring us in a leaf. They hold up the leaf and say, hey, what is this? And that's kind of a thing that we don't trust for actually IDing plants. Again, we go to the bloom structure, the flower, to actually ID a species when we want to have a positive ID or do genetics work on it. And the reason for that is there's a little thing called phenotypical plasticity, which means the gene pool can kind of mix things up and give you different ideas for the same species. And for the early parts of botany and biology, we did a lot of misidentification on things because they looked different to us because they either existed in a different part of the region, higher up in altitude, over in the next valley, something like that. And come to find out, some of these things that we named different things were actually the same species. And we had to do that early with botany too. So I'll give you an example. This one's also another one you want to avoid. So down here, this is a vine. You can probably go to any Home Depot or anywhere in the country and buy it. It's called pothos. It's also called devil's ivy down here. Has a little heart-shaped leaf on it. Gets a little yellow in the stem as it gets older. This is a big irritant to a lot of people, and it makes a lot of people break out. Tends to crawl across the ground, and then it starts to go up trees. And depending on how much sunlight it's getting, the nutrients it's getting, the water it's getting, and its particular genetics, you can wind up with something like this one. That's the same plant, no variegation, none of that yellowing in the leaf, darker green and green stems because it's grown deeper in the shade in a certain spot. It's probably got more nutrients in the organics in that spot too. And then as it starts to climb up trees, I don't even know if I can get this one in. It starts to look like this. This leaf is about 2.5 feet long, and it has, you can see that serration in the outside edge, how it's all frilly. And that's the same plant, literally the same plant, because I took this, my little small variegated heart-shaped leaf, and this huge one off the same plant. And all of these are big irritants to a lot of people. That's the reason we call it devil's ivory. You crawl through it. Another name for the big leaf things, because when it grows up the trees, it tends to get more sun. The vines get about 2 to 3 inches around, and you can actually climb up the vines and hide up in the trees, and they call it hunter's robe because it's good to, it's natural camouflage. You can sit up there and go for deer or whatever you're going for. But you better hope you're not one of those people who's sensitive to it the first time you try that out, and you'll know it the next day because it's a lot, same irritant, the basic dermatological issues that you have with poison ivy and that sort of thing. They get on your skin. They don't really penetrate into your cells and that sort of thing. It's more about the oils on your body. And we're going to talk a lot about that when I get into the poison ivies and that sort of thing, about how it works on your system. As much as we know, there's actually a lot we don't know about poison ivy. Not everyone is allergic to poison ivy. Usually somewhere between 15 to 20% of the population has already had a breakout from getting in contact with it. And the other people, they either are what we call, like people like to say they're immune. I say I'm immune to poison ivy all the time. I can pull it, no problem. I can pull poison oak. I can't touch poison sumac because it makes me break out, but it has a higher concentration than poison ivy and poison oak do. So the other thing we found out about that is if you're never really immune, because somebody who's been pulling it their whole life like I have, the next time I go into a poison ivy patch, that's where I reach that critical point somewhere with my contact with that chemical. And now I have a breakout. So it's like a bee sting. You can get stung by bees and you say, oh, it's nothing bad. 10 minutes later, it doesn't hurt. There's other people who go into shock almost immediately. So, oh, they're allergic to bees. Well, that doesn't mean if you get stung by another bee down the road and you just happen to be the one who just had a mild reaction all your life, you can reach that point and still go into shock from being stung by a bee. So how much you're exposed to this stuff. If you're out there for weeks working, pulling this stuff around, you do that year after year in different sections and different places. And again, we're talking about poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac, mango trees. They all use the same chemical. So this is a huge amount of stuff. It's everywhere in the US that if you get in contact with it, you're going to build up more over time. So the more contact you have, you could ultimately end up having some pretty severe reactions. So another one down here in Florida, pretty much in the whole state, there's another invasive species. This is called, let's see if I can get a better leaf shot. Can't see myself. So that's what the leaf looks like. Usually has anywhere from 7 to 10 sometimes leaflets on it. Most people call it Florida holly. That's a terrible name because it's not from Florida and it's not a holly, but it gets a red berry on it. It was imported for the landscape industries decades ago. And at the time we had male and female plants. We still do. Some plants aren't both sexes on the same plant. So we only imported the females because of the ones who got the lovely berry. And that worked good for a decade or so. And then somebody accidentally imported some of the wasps that fertilized them. And we ended up getting some pollinated wasps come into the country in some cargo of something. And the Brazilian pepper now can breed and seed. Animals love it. Birds eat it. Raccoons, everything spreads it. So we have tens of thousands of acres in Florida, all the way up to the panhandle of this stuff that we're trying to eradicate. And it's actually in the poison ivy family. So it's one of those ones, if you touch it and you're sensitive, it's fairly low compared to poison ivy and some of the others. But if you're sensitive, or if you've been working with it a lot, the sap's really sticky. And if you're cutting it up, the sawdust sticks everywhere too. And it's like, it's not something you want to play in. So it's one, but again, if a hurricane comes through down here and you come down and you're looking for that little leaflet like that, all those leaves are stripped off. These trees are broken down. So how do you avoid that stuff? We're going to get into that as we go along. I do not have an example of poison ivy. Unfortunately, my neighbor had one 2 days ago. He had one running up his tree on a palm tree, and I was going to go get it. It was a great example. And he cut it down on Sunday and killed it off for me. So, which most people don't want it in their yard. It's a native down here, and we actually encourage it in the environmental areas that we have because it's great for seasonal birds. Our last set of birds that are migrating through in the late fall and everything, actually, it's a major food source for them. So we leave it off trails, but we keep it clear from most people. But everybody knows the old saying.
Scott, we have a question here that may be pertinent.
Sure.
What is the most prevalent chemical in toxic plants? I guess we're getting all sciencey here now.
Great. Well, the one we're going to talk about tonight is called urushiol, which is what's in poison ivy, poison oak, sumac, mangoes, and half a dozen other things out there. So it's the big one that you run into. So anything that's in that group is going to be the ones, because they're so prevalent. Like I say, all 50, or not all 50 states, except for Hawaii and Alaska, you've got at least 1, 2, maybe 3 plants in your state that all use this same chemical, and it's all just contact. One of the things we always talk about when we talk about poisoning and that sort of thing is everybody thinks, oh, well, you ate something. If somebody got poisoned because they ate, some herb that they foraged out in the park or something like that, that's very different. You've ingested that. That's totally a different effect on your body. I wouldn't suggest eating poison ivy either, but most plants, if you just brush up against them, unless you happen to be a lucky person who's sensitive to that particular plant, aren't going to bother you. But with this group, with this chemical, the urushiol, this is one that is so prevalent in so many species. It's a natural defense. And like I say, it occurs all the way up into Canada on both coasts and everything. So it's really, you're nowhere on North American continent. You can't find it unless you're in an area where it's frozen most of the year or it's isolated enough like Hawaii. And that just takes enough time. Luckily, Hawaii has a great program for monitoring species coming in. They have a lot of exotic species of insect and plants that they're fighting also. But I doubt that anybody's going to have a potted poison ivy and bring it over on a cruise ship and they're going to get off the ship with it. They're pretty tight about that. So, but again, back to the leaves of 3. So everybody see that? Yeah. Is it good?
Yep.
So does that look like leaves of 3? That look like 3 leaves?
Yeah.
So if you were out there and you saw leaves of 3, you might think, oh, that's poison ivy. I've got to avoid that. This is actually one of our native wildflowers. It's actually very nutritious. It's got more iron than spinach. But do you want to go around picking them? Uh-oh, I lost all the pictures. There we go. So the leaves of 3 isn't really a rule to go by. So, and those leaves, again, that phenotypical plasticity, depending on where that poison ivy is, how it's growing, you can have poison ivy that's very small, size of a quarter. You can have poison ivy that the leaves of 3 are 12 inches across, like a dinner plate. It can be a dark green, it can be a light green, it can have some yellow to it, turns red in the fall. It's pretty stuff in the fall, pretty easy to spot. If it grows up a tree, it tends to turn into a ball and has much bigger leaves up there. If it's growing in along a roadside where there's water that flows in and may sit for a little bit, it likes those moisture areas like that, riverbanks, that sort of thing. It's going to get bigger and thicker, probably darker greener. It's going to grow quicker. the vines that grow up the trees. One of the main things, especially if you're chainsawing stuff, is the vines that grow up a tree of poison ivy. The vine is very distinctive. It looks like a rope going up the tree, which is the stem, but then it has what looks like the rope is frayed all the way along the edges. And those are little mini roots that come out the side. And there's not any other vine out there that looks like that. So even in the dead of winter, when it's just sitting there and you think it's dead, it's not, or it's on a log and it looks like a rope up the whole log, a dark brown rope with a bunch of hairs growing out of the side of it that are dark brown too. It looks dead. It's not. It can sit over winter and just come back just fine. One of the problems that everybody has, they think, well, if you get this stuff on you and you go wash it off or you don't wash it off, even dogs, we've had cases where people's dogs have gone out and run through a patch and the dogs have thicker fur. So they now are now carrying that oil on their body, and the dog comes running back in, you go up and scratch your dog behind the ears, pet him, how you doing, boy, how was your run, blah, 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 checking for ticks if you're in that area and that sort of thing. And all you're doing is exposing yourself, your non-furry self, to the chemical on the dog. And then we have now, the latest studies have figured out that this chemical, the Urgasol in poison ivy, can last for 5 years on materials, hard surfaces. So everybody who's out there with chainsaws, rakes, truck beds, water coolers, any safety gear that you're wearing. I know anybody who's out there chainsawing wearing all their required safety gear because it's great to wear that stuff in the heat when you're killing yourself. It's just better to have more layers on. So all your chaps, your chainsaw itself, if you cut through a tree and it had a poison ivy vine on it, now your blade's got poison ivy. It's got that urusol. If you're not cleaning it off and you start handling it, it's just a matter of time before you either break out or somebody else borrows your stuff. Again, rake handles, you go in your truck, you take your gloves off, you throw them in the bed of the truck, or you put them up on the cab, set them on the seat. Now your seat's contaminated. You reach up, you grab your steering wheel, you wipe your forehead with your shirt. Your shirt's got the oil on it. It just keeps going. And we're going to talk about the ways that we try to get rid of the oil because it's pretty tough. There's some good recommendations out there. There's some old-timey ways of trying to do it, and some of those are actually work. Some of them work, but they aren't too good to do, and we'll discuss that.
Scott, we got another question that popped up. This is a good question. So you were talking about during the winter, it's still very much alive. Is it still toxic?
Yes. So you can cut down a log. It's got, let's say there's a oak tree out in your back section of your property. It's old or it's rotten out. You're not just cutting down a good tree, I hope. You've got a reason to remove it, So you go out there and you cut it down, and it's got this, it's in late fall and it's just got these ropey things growing up the side of it. You chop that up, you split it up, you put it out back, and and you wait till next year because you're going to use that for firewood. Well, when you go to burn that chemical now goes into the air, which is why we don't burn poison ivy, which we actually do because in times of hardship where we're down here, we do stupid things down here too. We bulldoze this stuff into huge piles. We run it through chippers, and then we incinerate it sometimes to get rid of it. Well, if you're standing next to that pile and it's lit up, guess where all those oils are going? They're now aerosolizing into the air. And if you're standing there without a respirator on, you're breathing it in. It's getting on your skin. It's getting on your clothes. It's getting on your vehicles. And
Scott, that's an excellent point. For everybody else, Team Rubicon, gray shirts have been exposed to debris burn pits. And I had an incident commander where several people had to go to the hospital because they stood next to this debris burn pit. And he told me what the tree it was that they were burning. I forget. I want to say it was poison wood, but whatever it was, it did send several people to the hospital.
Again, poison wood is in that same family. That Urgasol, it's the same chemical. So that's why I say it's fairly abundant as a protective measure in the environment in North America. And actually, poison wood actually grows all the way down into Central America. So if you're traveling out of the U.S., it grows down to Puerto Rico. It's on some of the Caribbean islands and that sort of thing. So it's a good one to know on any coastal thing. It's usually closer to the coast. It likes limestone and coral and that sort of thing. kind of, and we've got a lot of limestone down here where we're at. So it tends to show up in those spots. And I'm going to show you some here. I'm going to try not to contaminate myself. The last time I did this class, I was warning everybody not to do stuff. And I had actually cut the branch. I had a small branch because I have some in my yard. A small branch had broken off and it was close to the sidewalk. And I didn't want a neighbor to walk by and just push it out of the way or have it come across their face because it's a lot meaner than poison ivy. So I went down, I took my little handsaw and I just cut the branch off and didn't take any precautions. And a little bit of sawdust came back on me. And like 2 or 3 days after that, my forearm looked kind of like that picture you had up at the beginning, Justin, where your mango there. So it was a good lesson for me. I've never had it before. I've got 2 of them in my yard, had 2 daughters, taught them to avoid it in the wild and in the yard, and we never had a breakout. And then for this class last time, I broke one of my own rules and just went ahead and cut it. I didn't even have a shirt on. I just went out there and bare chested chopped this thing off. And luckily it only got on my arm. Could have been a lot worse. So again, leaves of 3. And one of the things people will tell you is, oh, well, the stem, lots of times the young stem on poison ivy is like a bright pink or a red as it's starting to grow. And unfortunately, that's not that good a rule either, because there's a lot of vines that do that. And I'm going to show you this. Hang on here. We get a leaf. So this stuff right here, I'm going to get it. There's a batch of it there. And I'm going to show you a leaflet. So there's your leaves of 3, right? Dark glossy. And if I can get it on the camera, if you can see, that's a red. See the redness in that stem? Yeah. Does that show up to everybody, or is that too faint? Yeah.
Yep. See,
So
Yep.
red stem, glossy green leaves of 3. Unfortunately, that's a gumbo limbo tree, not poison ivy. So again, that rule of 3 leaves, and I've actually seen poison ivy with 4 leaves. So you can have, again, that plasticity is there depending on the conditions and genetics and everything like that. And I bring up the gumbo limbo because it's a really common tree down here. And when it's mature, it actually has, we'll find a good looking one for you that hasn't been chewed on by something. It usually has anywhere from 5 to 8 leaflets. They're usually a dark green. So no big deal. It's kind of sappy. So if you're using your chainsaw on it, it's going to stick up your chain and everything. You're going to have to clean it a little bit more. But I haven't met anybody who breaks out from these. The other part of that is, though, this is poison wood. And without hopefully contaminating myself, one of the good rules about that is poison wood has leaves of 3. Everybody see those? So that's what you're looking for. Whereas the gumbo limbo, come on now, the gumbo limbo has 7, sometimes 10. So looks like, and you say, well, good, but I can tell that by the leaves of 3. But again, what if the leaves are stripped off of it? We got a problem. It does make a black sap, which is what the aerosol is doing. It'll actually ooze out of the trunks of trees. So if you're down here and you see a log and it's oozing black all over it in different spots, not all over it, but it'll ooze out at a spot, run down a foot, 2 feet away from that, there'll be another spot. That black sap has it there too. And if you're using a chainsaw on that, God bless your heart, because there isn't enough water and soap to help you after that. The problem with that is gumbo limbo and poison wood grow in the same areas. And if you put them together, it's really hard to tell which is which, even without a storm knocking it out of the air or anything else. Another
so
one
Scott, you did mention soap and water, right? But do you have, some folks are asking, do you have recommendations on other cleaning agents?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about the Urgasol and like I say, what you can do, can't do, things you some people will tell you to do, and I'm going to tell you not to do for certain reasons. And I'll give those, I'm going to do that in kind of a little section of itself. I'm just giving some examples here. This is another,
Okay.
this is another tree called Bashophia. And here's the problem with that. Bashophia has leaves of 3. It's dark green. And if you put it with gumbo limbo or poisonwood, they all look the same. These things are all growing together down here, especially. So when you get in there, you're clearing an area that's, just totally wind blown, knocked down, trees have snapped off and laying down and everything. You can have a whole mix of things that look a whole lot alike if they still have leaves on them. So really that black sap is one thing you want to look for, which I forgot one of my specimens. Hang on one second. Uh-oh, did you throw the mangoes out?
Screw those mangoes. Mike, you gotta come back to Florida, man. I'm getting itchy just watching this presentation, though.
Okay, so my other specimen, which was a mango that I was going to show you. Anybody who likes mangoes, if you ever see mangoes, very often they have black spots on them. They're oozing a little bit, and that's in the skin, and that's the main concentration of the ergosol in mango trees. So there are people who eat mangoes, and what do? They peel the skin off, which is where that high concentration is, because it's the plant trying to protect the seed from being foraged on. And then they don't wash their hands. They just chop up the mango or just start eating the flesh out of it. Well, now they've got the oil on their hands and it's on there. And some people blistered their lips, their tongue, their throat, because they've now internalized this stuff. So if you are one of those sensitive people and you think, oh, I can't go around mangoes, if somebody else peels them for you, you can probably enjoy mango meat in a salad or in a daiquiri or wherever you want to put it, or just fresh off the tree, because that sap is highly concentrated in the skin. So that's your most likely spot. And it's very evident by the black spots that'll show up on a mango if you leave it, and it'll actually have black spots and oozing out of it. And that's the chemical defending that seed against a predator or some herbivore coming along and foraging on it. So it doesn't work too good if you're a plant and your seeds drop down, they're delicious, and they all get eaten. Unless they can pass through the digestive tract of whatever eats them, that's not going to work out. So let me see what else we got. One more. So another common one, and I'm not sure really the full range of what this species is, but there's another common one down here. Everybody sees this growing there. It's called Virginia creeper. Grows a long ways up the East Coast, I know, up into the Carolinas and everything like that. This is another one that'll die off or die back in the fall. You think it's all gone, but it comes right back in the spring, comes right back up. Normally has 5 leaves, little 5 leaflets, little serrated edges on it. It can get that bright pink on that new growth and on that early stem. And doesn't bother me, but this is another one that's got a relative of the poison ivy. So if you're down here, it's very common pretty much everywhere in South Florida, up through Central Florida. And like I say, up along, I know at least along the coast and up into the Carolinas, it's there too. So if you're one of those people who's kind of sensitive to stuff, that may be one that you want to look out for. It has little tendrils, little corkscrewy pieces that come off of it, and that's how it holds onto a tree. So if you see a piece in the wintertime or the late fall and it's got little tendrils that are coming off that are holding onto the bark of an oak or whatever it's growing up, it doesn't have those little roots growing off the side that looks like a frayed rope, then you're looking at Virginia creeper and not poison ivy. Again, that poison ivy has those little roots out the sides. It's highly characteristic, and you can spot it growing up trees. If you start looking for it, you'll start seeing it in the woods all the time. You'll be like, oh, there's poison ivy over there. And it's like, it just looks like a piece of rope growing up the side of the tree. So it's fairly easy to spot once you get your eyes used to it. But mangoes, and I don't know where you guys are, down here in South Florida, mango trees, they're just single leaves. usually kind of a lanceolate spear shape. But they do have that chemical in them, just like the poison ivy and everything does, which is why some people are sensitive and you don't want to chop them up. And I can even show you on the back of this leaf. Everybody see those little black dots on the leaf? You see those little black dots?
Yep.
That's not an infection on that. That's actually the ergosol in the leaflet. So every part of this plant is toxic. We've had cases where people have chopped down a mango tree and again, split it up, put it out back, and then the next year, 4th of July or whatever, they make a fire out back in the pit with it, and you end up with respiratory problems with the people sitting around the fire, cooking marshmallows over it. God forbid putting it in a barbecue and trying to smoke something with it or anything like that. I've never heard anybody doing that, but it's a well-known thing for people down here. And mangoes are pretty much everywhere in South Florida. If you're, well, even up into Central Florida. If you're in an area where a mango will grow, I live on a street with probably about 25 neighbors, and I can guarantee you that probably 22 out of the 25 have a mango tree in their yard. So if you're responding to an area where these things are easy to grow and they're out there, they're going to have to be in the material that you guys are dealing with, unfortunately. And again, this stuff lasts for years. So it isn't like, well, we'll let that log dry out and, we'll give it 3 years and say that we know that doesn't work. And especially when you burn it, again, that puts it into the smoke and it just aerosolizes and goes up and it just continues on. So there's no real good way. Chop it up and put it in a pile somewhere to rot on its own and let the fungi and bacteria and bugs take care of it. Don't try to use it. We've got other plants in here, a little side thing, not something you guys are, well, we're going to talk about a couple plants. So let me give you another characteristic to look for. If you're working on material and it's fairly fresh material or it's a tree that's fallen and you start cutting into it and it's got white milky sap, that's a good indicator that that's a toxic plant. Usually we don't eat things with white milky sap. There are a couple exceptions. We eat some native figs down here and the tree has white milky sap, but we have to avoid the white milky sap. Number one, it gums up your chains. Again, it's crazy. It's actually got latex in it. So it's like a natural rubber. It gums up your stuff. And that white sap, if it gets on you, can be a skin irritant. If it gets in your eyes, it can actually cause people to go blind. And it's another one, if you burn it, that stuff goes into the air. And now you've got something that can cause respiratory problems and other contact issues with it. So it's something to avoid. So white sap's a good thing to look for. We have a lot of trees down here. There are species of cactus that have this same stuff. Our native fig trees down here have it. Anything that's in the ficus family. So if you have a ficus tree anywhere in your neighborhood, some people call them rubber trees and that sort of thing. There are hundreds of different species. They all have that white milky sap you want to avoid. If you're clearing just brush and that sort of thing, there's milkweeds everywhere in North America. Monarch butterfly uses them as a larval source, but they have a white sap. So if you're raking up a ton of this stuff and carrying up bundles of it, and you get that white sap on your arms, there's a good chance you could break out from it. You wipe your face with it, you get some in your eye irritant, or again, it can blind you if you get too much and that sort of thing. You certainly don't want to throw it on a brush fire somewhere, cleaning up the property or something like that. So white sap, bright colored leaves, warning a thing. And it's really, like I say, some of the things that have the ergosol, the poison ivy, the poison oak, you can kind of look for and learn to spot them in their different forms during the year. Mango, if you looked at it, unless it had fruit on it and you knew to look for that black sap oozing here and there on it, it wouldn't come up unless you knew that little fact about it. So it's a little hard. And because they're so prevalent, the species all over the place in North America, that's going to be a problem. So let's talk about how to clean up yourself, your equipment. Most people clean themselves up. You get done, you've been sawing all day, you've been hauling stuff, you're dirty, you're messy, you got all sweat and everything. You feel good about your work, but main thing you want to do is go take a shower, get a good meal. So unfortunately, usually when you try to go in and take a shower, and here's where people make a few moves. Let's assume that you have been continuing, you were into something and you've got it on you. Number one, you've got your clothes on you. It's on your clothes. A lot of people take the clothes off, throw them in the hamper, do whatever and all, and they wash it with their regular clothes. Well, usually it takes about 2 or 3 full washings before you get all the oil off, because laundry detergent doesn't usually do it. Laundry detergent isn't soap. It's a cleaner that we use for laundry, but it doesn't take out these finer particles. It's a very fine oil that we're talking about. That's what I say. It doesn't even penetrate into your skin, into your cells and that sort of thing. It kind of stops at your skin layer and interacts with proteins in your body. And it causes what we call an immune response, but it actually doesn't get deep enough to even get to the immune system. So it's kind of weird. Again, we don't know everything about how poison ivy and how it reacts. We don't understand that fully. We know what the chemical compound is. We know some people are more sensitive than others, but we have no idea why that's actually happening. We know some of the dynamics that's going on with the connection between it, but we can't stop it. So again, the clothes, take them off. If I've been out there and I've been sawing, I always wash anything that I'm using while I'm sawing, or if I've really been digging into something out deep in the environment, I always wash those clothes separately anyway, because that's always a good idea. You don't know what you're bringing back with you. You know, maybe you ran into some ticks. You got a batch of baby ticks stuck to you. You strip that shirt off. You just throw it in the laundry. You throw it in the hamper. Those baby ticks are going to crawl out of there. Next thing you know, you're peeling them off every wall in the house. They're going to spread. So just like anything else, you want to get your clothes off. Maybe keep a special pair of boots that you use for doing this kind of work. Keep those boots, take them off at the end of the day. You know, a lot of nurses do this for hospital work and everything. They got a pair of shoes they wear in the hospital. They go out to their car, they put those things in the box, or they come off when they first get to the house and they switch into a different pair of shoes. Those are the work shoes. And that's a pretty good thing because they might be tracking something in from the hospital. That makes pretty good sense. And it works pretty good for the type of work where you're getting into these heavily impacted areas, because you've got other issues. You might have some issues out there. I mean, you know, if you've got stagnant water and you've been in that, there's a lot of organisms and things in there you wouldn't drink that water, but it's okay for it to get on your boots, and then you walk in the house and your toddler's crawling around on the floor that night on the same stuff that you brought back with your work boots. You got to think about some of that stuff. So easiest thing with the work boots, if you're not going to wash them down, clean them off, is to keep them separate. You take those off, you put them in, and all the other clothing that you have on goes in separate laundry. And that's the best way you can do that. Now, when it comes to you, a lot of people want to go in and jump in the shower, and I get that. One of the worst things you can do is go in and jump in to a hot shower. And hopefully most of you aren't going from the heat working somewhere, you've been sweating all day and you go in and jump in a hot shower. Some of you might go in a lukewarm one. That's better than hot, but the best thing is cold. And the reason for that is because your skin, your pores open up when they get warmed up. And again, this oil is sitting on your skin. So if you go in there and you superheat your skin, feels great because you got a sore shoulder and everything and all, but now your pores are wide open, and that oil, anybody ever take oil and water when you were a kid, when you were in science class, take the glass of water and they pour some vegetable oil on top? The oil floats on top, it separates, but it's just sitting there. And that's one of the good things about sweating. I tell people all the time, it's like some people like to dry their sweat off, you know, and clear, change your shirt 2 or 3 times, and that's okay. But you got to realize that that shirt that's wet is actually helping you keep you. And a lot of the times, if you're in a really hot area, it's actually helping, that moisture is helping to cool you down, just like a cool rag would if you put it on. Not only that, excuse me, that long sleeve shirt that's wet from your sweat is that water level now that's sitting on top of that cloth, and the oils are just sitting on top of that, just like the oils in that glass of water when you were in that science class back as a kid. If you take that off, you run the risk of contaminating your hands now. And dry shirt, you put dry shirt on, well, now you can just recontaminate that. And it's more likely that the oil can penetrate into the dry shirt than on a wet shirt. So you take those clothes off, put them in a separate thing, get in the shower, turn on the cold water, just rinse yourself off to start with. That'll take some of the oils off. It'll just slough off if it's not already working its way into your skin a little bit, into the dermis and everything all. It's going to wash off some of that. Then you want to take a soap. And personally, I use Dawn dish soap. Everybody's seen the commercials where Dawn takes the oil for the animals that are, out there in the oil slicks and everything like that, cleans the oil off the penguins and the ducks and any seagulls that got stuck and otters and everything else. It's great at taking grease away. And these oils are basically just grease. So I take some Dawn dish soap, put it on, and I put it on a towel, on a hand cloth. And the reason you do that is we've done studies now, and the best way to remove this stuff is with soap and water and a rag, because the friction of you taking and pushing this down now and washing yourself in conjunction with the soap and the water, the cooler water, takes it off the best. Because if you don't get it off you, again, remember, it can last for a long time on hard surfaces. So don't just walk in the house and, take off some gear and throw it down on the floor, hang it up on the couch or something like that, because you're just asking, again, for problems coming into that. So once you got yourself cleaned off, that's pretty good. If you can, out in the field, depending on how bad the conditions are, where you're at, what kind of supplies and logistics is going on, I like to have an extra water cooler with me in the pickup. And one's for drinking and the other one's for just washing my hands and my forearms and my face, because I'm pretty well covered the rest of the time. I got long sleeves on. I've got that sort of thing on. I wear face covering most of the time. So that's all material that can be taken off and washed at the end of the day. But I usually don't have anything on my forehead. I just got a helmet. So, and I'm sweating up there. And one of the big mistakes you can make is you lift your helmet up and you take your glove or the back of your sleeve and you go like that and wipe it across your forehead. 2 days later, you got this weird bump showing up on your forehead. How could I get that? I wear a helmet all the time. You put it on yourself because it was on your hands from doing your work all day. So I know it's hard not to, have that thing to like take and rub at least your shoulder or something. Never use your forearms or your hands if you've been handling stuff, because if there's got something on there, don't rub your eyes with it, carry some small hand cloths or some disposable wipes and that sort of thing that you can pull out of your pack. Or I wear a belt. Some people wear or bring full packs out with us and that sort of thing. If you're in a truck, you're lucky enough to have somebody supplying you with stuff, keep that stuff around so, you can wipe your face down, clean yourself up. On average, it takes at least 2 hours, sometimes 24 hours for the oils to work into your skin. So if you get to an area and you can clean up that night, you're running pretty good rates if you clean up well. Again, cold water, let it wash over you, then use the soap, use a rag. One of the reasons I use the Dawn dish soap is because it comes in you can get it in any size squirt bottle, little travel bottles and everything. You can get the big 2-gallon refills and everything else. So it's easy to clean the outside of that. So if I'm handling that out in the truck, I got a little small travel size one. I'm handling that. It's either on my belt or it's in the truck and I handle that. I can take a wipe and wipe down the outside of that plastic container. And now I know that's clean. I've wiped that down, washed it off. You can even, while you're washing your hands and everything, pick up the bottle and soap it up and rinse it off too, just like that. That keeps it clean. Bar of soap. If you take a bar
I
of
do
soap,
have one question. Delfino, do you want, I'm sorry, Scott, but Delfino, do you want to ask your question?
No, sorry, that was an accident.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
so a bar of soap. Problem with that is if you take that and you start scrubbing on yourself and it's got some little creases or any little spots in it and everything else, and you don't clean the soap afterwards, there could be oils on the bar of soap. So the next time you use it or your kids use it or your spouse uses it or whoever uses it, they could get contaminated. And that bar, even though it's nicer not to have the plastic little bottles coming into the environmental issue and recycling and all that, that's a much better way to control your possible contamination than a bar of soap. And again, I recommend if you're out in the field and everything, everybody should have their own little individual bottle of that Dawn dish soap or whatever dish soap you like, Ivory or whatever at all. It needs to be something. I just like Dawn because I know it works great with oils. We use it for other stuff in the environmental field, so it works great. against things like that. If you have, a bar of soap on the back of the truck where you got a cooler and or a water source where people can clean up, if everybody's sharing that bar of soap, how do you know that bar of soap isn't getting contaminated by one person? It didn't get cleaned off well enough, and the next 3 people who use it who didn't get contaminated that day now are. So if you got your own personal soap to use, you're limiting the effects that you might have if you're the one who got it on you that day. You're keeping other people safe while using it as an individual that way. Doesn't mean you can't take a little squirt out of your bottle and squirt it on somebody else's hand, on their hand, and let them use it, but don't let them touch your bottle. And always clean your bottle afterwards. So cleaning the stuff off, once it's clean, one of the things that I hear people say all the time is to use isopropyl alcohol. They take and rub down their forearms and their hands with isopropyl alcohol. And that actually works. It does help to break down the oils and everything and all. If you use some isopropyl alcohol and then just do some soap and water afterwards and everything, that works. A lot of people use isopropyl alcohol out in the field. But like I say, if they can't get to where they can get a water source to use soap or anything like that on any regular basis, some people even bring the little hand sanitizers, which are mainly just isopropyl alcohol. So when you put it, one of the problems with this is if you're out there and you use alcohol on your skin, that works because it dries out the oils. It also dries out your skin. And when you dry out your skin, you don't have that natural moisture barrier. You're supposed to have that little layer of film of moisture. You notice it more when you sweat, but you always have that moisture barrier. That's your first defense against anything coming into your body. So if you dry your skin out and you get re-exposed to those oils, it's much easier for them to penetrate and do it much faster. And there are cases where we know that people that have come in contact and started to break out within 2 minutes. So it's a numbers game. It's about how good you are about keeping yourself from coming in contact with it. And if you are coming in contact with it, minimize your contact with it on as much of your bare skin as you can. So that's where that comes down to it. And again, clean everything separately. If you go in, I'm kind of notorious if I use a shower that I'll, or especially if it's a tub, you got other families members using it and all, I'll even rinse the tub down after I'm done, put some dish soap in there, scrub it down with a disposable towel just to make sure that the oil didn't wash off me and it's now sitting in the tub. And, my daughters are going to go in there and take a bath. My wife's going to sit in there and, take a relaxing bubble bath. And meanwhile, I've now contaminated the base or the sides of the tub. So again, those surfaces, and again, this oil can last for a long time. Putting it in the dryer, that's why I say we like to wash things at least twice before we put them in the dryer. Because if you put it in the dryer, the heat, again, allows those oils to become volatile. They go into the air as an aerosol, and now it's stuck to the sides of your drum in your dryer. So just some things to think about. Again, cleaning your tools. Alcohol is great for cleaning your chains and all that sort of thing. So if you're got some isopropyl alcohol on a wipe, disposable wipe, put it on your handles on your rakes or your shovels or whatever you're using, door handles on your truck, on the tailgate if you've been taking them up and down all day by the handles. A lot of people don't think, they open the truck door, they get in. Some people roll the window down. Some people roll the window back up. They got their forearm, they lay it on the window as they're driving along. They're touching all the steering wheel. All those surfaces can be contaminated now. So you really want to clean yourself before you get in the truck if you can. If you can't, minimize that contact with the inside of the truck and clean those surfaces where you can. Clean every piece of safety equipment you have. I know it's a pain, again, but that's another thing where alcohol can come in. Take alcohol, and I use Lysol wipes, and just rub down your chaps on the outside at least, if not the whole thing. Make sure you're getting those little weird crevices where things clip together on the belts and everything, because that's where this stuff can sit. And you think, oh, it's good to go. And you're clipping and unclipping it, and you get a little bit on your hand, and you start all over again. So it's worth a little bit extra time to keep yourself safe and your team members safe, because especially in cases like yours, if you've got people out there and you're working as a team, and you get 4 or 5 people on your team who are experiencing real problems here, then that limits your effectiveness. And what do we do with them? Now we have to take care of them. We're going to send them home. Can we get new people out here? You're losing time. And maybe people that you need, maybe you have somebody, who happens to get infected, who's the best one in the area and who was readily available. And now they've got this huge rash or have a breathing problem because they were exposed to something. And now they have to go back home and, you have to go find the person who's still qualified in that specific area that you can bring into play there. So it makes sense to prevent everything you can. If you want to prevent injuries, obviously, this is just another injury. It's another issue that can happen because of your work in the field. Make sense?
Scott, a couple questions we got in the chat.
Sure.
Did you mention how long surface contamination can last?
On hard surfaces, we usually say 2 weeks. So that's like
Okay.
your kitchen counter, the handle on your refrigerator, because you walked in the door and you didn't even clean up your hands that great, and you had to go get that cold drink. So
Dang, 2 weeks.
So
That's
at
bad
least 2
news.
weeks on hard surface, and if it's in the material itself, like I say, your mango logs and the poison ivy vines that are growing up the side of the oak tree and all that stuff, you're looking at years. 5 years, we know that's the best, because we haven't really been studying it that much. I mean, we know it's a problem, but we haven't done a whole lot of serious study on, well, how long can this stuff hang around? And now we've done the test now, and the longest indicator we have is that in the wood and in the bulk material, the dead, what we would call dead vines, it's still highly volatile. It's like you just don't want to, it's not something you want to play with at any time. You want to use it, and then get rid of it as best you can, not burning it.
A standard protocol that Team Rubicon has for mold decontamination is 10 to 20% bleach. Does that do anything for these oils? And somebody else asked about peroxide.
And number one, you don't want to put bleach on your body. That's actually harmful. Bleach is great. It kills everything. It also kills your cells. So if you're pouring bleach on yourself or even watered down bleach, that's not a good habit to get into. Maybe you're trying to lighten your skin, but that's actually usually done with peroxides. Peroxide doesn't really do anything. Peroxide is not really, it's kind of even if, I know you guys probably got some medics on your teams and everything, but for medical conditions, everybody's used to, if you're older, like I am, that, you got to cut back when you were a kid. And the first thing they did was they dumped peroxide on it. And if it bubbled, that meant it was cleaning the wound out. And well, that's not actually how it works. It bubbles because it's got one extra oxygen molecule. And once it hits the air, it releases that oxygen. That's where the bubble comes from. Leave the bottle cap off a bottle of peroxide overnight. It doesn't bubble anymore because all the free oxygen ran away. So I don't recommend using peroxide for that at all. So, for maybe washing material out of like a laceration or something, if you got a lot of dirt and that sort of thing in there, just to use it, like you'd use a saline mix or something like that to flush the wound out, that kind of makes sense, but I don't use peroxide. Peroxide does kill mold, since you brought up mold, and I didn't even talk about that sort of thing. That was one of the other things, like when I say you can get into things on your boots and that sort of thing and on your body that you don't want to bring home. If you're out there and it's been a while, it's not usually first thing right after an event. If you're on the ground, before the wind's even done or the water's gone down or whatever happened. Again, everybody thinks stagnant water. You don't want to drink stagnant water. You don't want to wash off in that. You don't want to, but people don't have any problem putting their boots in it and then taking those boots home. And again, on the floor, that sort of thing. Mold, fungi, the spores after. And one of the great things about fungi, it's their big job. One of their big jobs on our planet is to break down lignin, which is the main part of trees, and cellulose and a bunch of other things. They're basically little biochemists. They find material that's no longer in use. They attack it, break it down, and put it back into the components so they can be reutilized as nutrients and components and something else. Us, a tree, a crop that we grow. So, everybody who's ever composted, thank the bacteria and the fungi for doing their work. The problem with that is when you get impacts like these floods, tornadoes, things like that, just like there's health issues out there, you know, if you got water issues and that sort of thing, you can have all kinds of health issues show up with people with, you know, not enough clean water and living in squalor and all that sort of thing after these impacts. The fungi and the bacteria tend to go crazy because there's so much for them to do now, and they surge. And when they surge, they're very happy. And if they're happy, they reproduce, and they do it through spores. So when they spore, that's really a bad thing, because if you're walking through, you know, you got a big pile of debris and, you know, you're moving it with, you know, even backhoes and that sort, and they're picking it up, and you see all this dust flying out of there, and it's drifting on the air. It's not like dirt that falls off and goes to the ground. It's like it's dust in the air. You usually see a little bit of yellow or some greenish color to it, some dark browns. It's lighter than dirt and everything though, and it's drifting around in the air. Those are all spores. Now you breathe spores in all the time. Luckily, our bodies are built to catch that stuff on little hairs in our nose and in our sinuses. Goes through this weird little contraption in your sinuses, and it actually filters that stuff out before it allows it into your lungs. Very few spores are going to make that in. And as long as you're not immunocompromised or have some other underlying health issue, it's not going to be a big deal for most people. But if you can literally see the cloud of spores where you're moving this stuff, or you're shoveling it out of a pile or pitchfork, or like I say, even front end loaders are picking it up and moving it around. If you're in that cloud downwind, you don't want to be there, not without a respirator, because you're just breathing that stuff in. And that stuff gets on your body, it's on your clothes, it's on your boots if you're out there walking around in the material, even if you've had a respirator and everything, and you take that home. If you walk in your house with that, you get in your truck with that, now you've contaminated those surfaces with that. And it's much harder to get rid of spores. Spores usually need moisture to germinate though. So just the spores themselves can be a respiratory irritant, but dragging them around and then getting them in the spots where it's cooler or in a cool or moist area, that'll cause them to germinate on their own. And now you've got a problem, you know, something else going on. So that shirt that's all dusty from that pile you were working on, if you take it in the house and you've been sweating on it, now it's moist, and you throw it in the hamper and it sits there for 2 days. Now you've got a moist, dark space, and you're probably air conditioning your house, or you live in a region that's already nice and cool without having the air conditioner. You've created the ideal location for that stuff to start growing. So it's one of those things, it's overlooked. It happens a lot. It gets worse as you go into tropical areas. So anybody, again, who's going down to the Caribbean or South America or anything like that, that usually doctors who deal with that sort of thing know to look for certain fungi, even like infections. It doesn't really happen here, but down in the Caribbean, there's several species that live along the beach area. So people have been known to go to the beaches, get infected, and come back, have a small cut on their foot or something like that, and it internalized on them, and you can literally go septic and die within a few days, and you never even knew you had anything in your system. So better to, you know, that's not a good thing. And the doctors in Florida, or well, Florida, maybe in South Florida they might, it's because it's, like I say, it's more of a Caribbean thing, those particular species that attack us that way. But if you go, you know, you fly back to Ohio and you're not feeling too good, the doctors, it could take them longer to diagnose that you had a fungal infection, you know, then they're going to be able to help you if sepsis sets in. So it's always better to protect yourself. I know respirators suck. Just the common dust masks, you can use those if you just got mild, like you're getting out of the pickup and walking across and you're staying away from the work. But a dust mask doesn't stop the particles. It can actually get in your eyes too. So again, you're talking about a numbers game. If 1 or 2 particles get in your eye's going to tear up. You know, you blink your eyes all the time. That's nature's way of cleaning your eyes. Obviously, if you get a whole batch of stuff in your eyes, you hopefully are going to go flush your eyes out. But just breathing it in and getting it on your body, if you've got cuts or injuries, that's another thing. They're going to move in. You know, that's, again, everybody thinks fungi eat almost anything they can run into, and some of them specialize in eating animals. So they're helping dispose of the animal that's, got hit by the storm and is dying over there in the pile somewhere, or the rats who died out somewhere, or, a possum, raccoon, whatever's lying around. So if you happen to be in an area over there where that's at, and you're breathing those spores in, you already know that that fungi feeds on meat, and you're just meat. You're the same as the possum as far as the fungi is concerned. You just got more resource for it to uptake. And if it can, it will. So they're very good at their job. So
We
it's
may
not,
or may not have worked at a pig farm that was submerged for months.
oh yeah.
Yeah, so
It had dead pigs laying around
some
still?
people have some stories about that. Tens of thousands of pigs.
Is that up in Carolinas?
No, that was in the Bahamas, actually. That was the Hurricane Dorian. Scott, if you don't mind, I'd like to just open it up for people to chime in for questions, because we don't want to hog you all night here, but does anybody want to just forget about the chat? Just yell it out if you, or put your hand up, or I don't know, free for all. Oh my God, really? Nobody? All right. I see. Okay. Somebody has their hand up. Don't know who. Just go ahead and unmute. You're welcome to ask.
Hey, just a quick, this is Al. Thanks for this great information. But just kind of, I'm trying to get my head around all this here. The best thing to do, you go into these places here, is put as much protective gear on as you can
Right.
to cover the skin, and then clean yourself the best you can afterwards. Is that kind of the I know the visualization trying to identify stuff, but that's a
Right.
lot to ingest. So is it best just to cover everything up, and it is covering those instead of, we have short sleeve shirts, is those arm sleeves you can get, Team Rubicon and other ones you can buy, are those the same protective as a normal shirt sleeve, better, or would you recommend something different? Thank
Well,
you.
if you're using like Tyvek, they make like sleeves and that sort of thing you can put on that have elastic in the wrist and everything. You can pull them on. My problem with Tyvek is it's actually a lot hotter than. So if you've never walked around in a Tyvek suit with a respirator on, it's not fun, even if it's cool out. It's not an enjoyable thing. And respirators can be a problem too. When I say respirator, I'm talking about a full set. I'm not talking about like a dust mask or anything at all. I've even got full face respirators. So, but one of the things about that is you got to be careful if you've never been tested for respirators. Like if you go like where I'm at.
Yeah, Scott, our policy, we're not allowed to wear respirators or be in areas that would require them.
Okay.
Because of the fit, because of exactly what you said, the fit requirements.
Right. That's what I say. You can do more damage to yourself trying to breathe through the respirator. You think, oh, I'm protecting myself. And, 15 minutes in, you pass out because you're not getting enough oxygen because you don't have the lung capacity or build up, especially if you're stressed out, really working, you got to, those things need to be addressed.
And one last thing, Al, I actually do, because clearly I do have a reaction to some stuff. I do keep Tyvek in my go bag, in my saw bag rather. So if I'm in an area where I see obviously there's something that wants to kill me,
Mangoes.
yeah, I'm the one guy that'll put on a Tyvek suit with chaps underneath the Tyvek even. I think Charlemagne, I think you were up next.
Hey, Scott, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you for your presentation. I am pretty new to TR, but interested in doing some of the sawyering. I have reacted to all of the above. So I assume that anything in the Urushiol family I would react to. So, I mean, I know mangoes, ivy, sumac, those are things, and I have been sensitive to those. So I've got some great resources from you, the Lysol wipes, the Urushiol, or I'm sorry, the Tyvek, as well as I'm not the Tyvek, drawing a blank. Yes, the Dawn. So I am in Florida and will be primarily probably responding here. What is your recommendation? So he kind of touched on that on the clothing wise. Is there something we can wash the clothing with? I've got all of the stuff we can wash ourselves with, but what are you washing the clothing with?
I actually put Dawn dish soap in it when I wash them, but I wash them separately from everything else.
Yes.
That's one of the things I like. If I'm on the road somewhere, I will go to a local laundromat and do my stuff there rather than take it home with me. I clean it 2 or 3 times before I bring stuff back. So
Okay. Understood. Perfect.
I
I know putting Dawn in your dishwasher is not great. However, I didn't know about the washer.
Take a video of that. I want to see how that pans out for you.
I'm so sure.
or you're going to get bubbles. You know?
Scott, there's a lot of times, Scott, where we're going on an operation and we're lucky to get laundry done every 3 to 4 days, and we end up wearing clothes 2-3 days in a row. Is there anything we can do? Take a cold shower with the clothes on? Is there anything we could do to minimize the oil?
Not really. That's what I say. You need to wash the stuff. So that's the thing. If you're going to be out there, for multiple days, and you know it, I mean, ideally you have a new set of, a new long sleeve shirt and whatever
Sure.
every day, if that's possible. If it's not, I mean, after hurricanes down here, we've had times where, we didn't get power back and that sort of thing for weeks, sometimes months in areas. So doing laundry is a little bit hard to do. So
Do you recommend doing the laundry in cold water as well?
yes,
Yes.
because
Right, now, if we ingest orally the urushiol, how long can we expect that to be in our system?
if you ingest it orally, you're going to have a reaction. It's either like I say, mango skins. If somebody's sensitive, peeling a mango and then they put it in their mouth and they've got some of the oil from the skin on their hands, they're going to blister. Your gums and your lips, your tongue are much more sensitive to stuff like that. So you're going to feel that pretty quick. And if you ingest it just as an aerosol in the air because somebody's burned some or something's kicked up, that can even happen with temperatures like down here. Once we hit 90 degrees, we don't cut certain things because the plants will give off volatile chemicals at that temperature. So we do things in the fall when it's cooler, below 90. And we work on those things then. And we have, we do, I do a lot of environmental work for eradication of exotics and that sort of thing. We use a lot of chemicals. So anybody who doesn't like, using chemicals, sorry, there's no way we can clear tens of thousands of acres of exotics with a handful of people. The county can't afford that, So, but we do spray and that sort of thing. But even some of the chemicals that we use, we can't go in and spray things because we're small targeting individual things, in habitats to preserve the habitat. And if we use them over a certain temperature, they aerosolize. They don't kill the thing we sprayed it at because it just turns into a vapor and goes up and kills the tree above it. You come back 2 weeks later and there's a dead branch on the tree from where you just sprayed it. So the heat is something you definitely want to avoid as soon as you heat it up. If somebody's burning something, if you inhale it just as an aerosol like that, you're gonna have respiratory issues. Even if you're healthy, you're feeling fine, you just take one good inhale and you're gonna know, man, that was no good on it. And you're gonna move out of the way of wherever that is if you can. But
How about for preventative maintenance for something topical? I know I worked in the trades for quite a while, and we had like a second skin that you'd put on and you'd wash off at the end of the day.
yeah, they do.
Does that help at all, or?
Yeah, there are products that and that's basically like they are, that second skin, the little liquid Band-Aid stuff, and it goes on your arms. The problem with that is it's not really waterproof. So if it's like suntan lotion,
It washes right off, yeah.
Everything right. You gotta apply it several times during the day. But does it work? Yes. I even use, if I really know I'm going to be crawling into something really bad. Like I say, sumac and I do not get along, so I'm very good at spotting it if I'm out there somewhere in the woods. But every now and then I still screw up, and I know if I'm going in, usually up in the Carolinas and everything, sumac doesn't come down as far as I am down here, but from about, again, above Lake Okeechobee, up through the Carolinas, up almost into Maine and everything and all, but it's in thin strips. Sumacs I should say poison sumac, because there are other sumacs out there. They do look very similar. So again, it's very hard sometimes to identify the one in that little thicket. That's the one you shouldn't be touching. The easiest way is by the berries, but they only have berries at a certain time of the year. So you can't do it. But I'll take Benadryl used to make it's for like poison ivy, everything like that. And it's got a gel form too. It's actually a gel, and they don't have the control of it anymore. Benadryl doesn't. So you can go to a CVS or a Walgreens or whoever's in your area. And if I know I'm going to really crawl through something, or even think that I got contaminated that day, if I wipe my forehead and it's just not feeling right there or something like that, after I clean up, after I shower, I'll put that on. But if I know I'm going out there and I'm going to be in an area where it's heavy, I'll put a layer of that above my forehead. I'm notorious for touching my own forehead and infecting myself. So I'll put that on. You definitely don't want it in your eyes, but you don't want, poison ivy or poison sumac in your eyes either. And put it on my forearms, and it acts as that second skin. Plus it's already got a defense against that reaction that's going to happen. So I'm kind of preemptive striking there with that product. But that would be something that I would do only if I knew, like, oh, I do carry a small bottle of it with me, because if I do have a patch, if I start feeling something, I tend to like to treat it as quick as I can to stop it. So.
Thanks, Scott. Justin, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Great class.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining. Anybody else? We'll get in maybe one more question. We'll wrap up.
Hey, just real quick, Scott, what was that item you were just describing?
It's
The
a
second.
Hang on 1 second. I got a bottle of it in right here.
New skin. Thank you.
Yeah,
It's called Second
New
Skin.
Skin.
It's liquid Band-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it actually does work. We own a tree business and I'm very allergic to all that stuff. So I use that and it works. And then when I get out, I use the rubbing alcohol, like he said, in the shower. And I haven't been able to break out in a while.
I've been lucky. I've been using those long sleeve nylon shirts from the dollar store. They work good.
Great
Yep.
idea.
Yep.
So say long sleeves is the main thing, because it's like I say, most people who break out, they get it on their forearms, shows up on their hands, on their face. I had a guy one time, he was just weed eating along a trail, and he went through a patch of poison ivy, which he did not know how to identify. It was actually growing in with a bunch of ferns too. So he was clearing the trail edge to keep the trail wide enough. And we keep usually a distance off the trail so we can not have somebody just sitting right there if somebody's walking down the trail and that sort of thing down here. But he was in shorts and a short sleeve shirt and was out there with his weed eater, and he went down through a whole patch, probably 40 foot long on both sides, which of course the weed eater just chopped it up into little bits, and the little bits stuck to him just like it is when you use a weed eater. It comes back and little pieces stick on you, and he didn't think anything of it. Well, the next day, everything down below his knees, his arms, and part of his face and his neck were broke out really bad. Luckily, he had sunglasses on. Otherwise, it could have been a lot worse. But definitely one of those things to think about. You don't want to just start chopping it up. And so we even had a guy one time who was so sensitive to poison ivy that he couldn't work outside when it was in bloom, because he would break out. He would have respiratory problems just from the pollen of poison ivy. So
Is the clothing that wicks just as good as the regular clothing?
I like the wicking stuff, but I live down here, so we
Yeah, I'm in Florida too, so.
yeah. So it's like, yeah, I like the wicking stuff. I tend to stay cooler in it, even if you're sweating. Again, it takes that off, but it helps keep you cooler. I don't think it has any advantage over a regular cotton sleeve. Again, it's just a matter of giving yourself a layer of protection. That's why I swear I wear, stuff up almost to my nose. I wear sunglasses or protective eye gear. Even if I've got a full helmet with the face shield on and everything and all, it's like I still wear safety glasses underneath that, because I never know what's going to happen. I'm just kind of paranoid about that. I only had one incident in my life where I actually had a chainsaw kick back on me after a hurricane, and I had a tree that was under more pressure than I realized at the time, and it kicked back and stuck in the chap. And I know a lot of guys were always like, oh, you don't need chaps. It's too hot down here. We're only going to cut a couple branches. And it's like that thing kicked back into my thigh. And I looked down and that chap was there. And that saw cut off before I even knew it even kicked back on me. And I've never not worked with them. It's ridiculous to try and do.
Scott, we'll get you into one of my chainsaw classes, and we'll get your buddies in there, and we'll get them educated on chaps. I tell you what, holy cow, you almost learned the hard way. Let's wrap up with Cisco. Make it a good one, Cisco.
Hi, Scott. Go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So somebody was asking about the product that I was talking about that I use.
Oh, right.
I don't usually get to say a specific product or anything like that. So, and like I say, Benadryl used to make a stuff, and it was just itch relief gel, but they don't own it's now outside of the patent. So anybody who's out there can make it. So I buy it at CVS. It's called Itch Relief Gel. It's just CVS, which is a local, I don't know how far they go in the nation. I got to get there. There we go. But if you go to Walgreens or anything like that, it'll say Itch Relief Gel. You want the gel because that's kind of that second skin if you put it on. And it's also something that's going to help you if you actually do get hit. So you can carry just like spot treat areas, or if you know you're going to crawl into something that is going to be bad, but you still need to go that way, then you put it on your forearms and your hands and, wherever you want to feel need protected at. And it'll apply to you just like that second skin. And like I say, if you do get contaminated, it's already got some ingredients in there that are going to help stop that reaction. Okay.
Okay, so I'm sorry if I missed it. Great class, by the way, Scott. Thank you. I'm in South Florida, and I have fishtail palms in my yard. And every time I cut into them, the sap in that is like wiping wet fiberglass over my skin. Did you mention that?
No, I did not. But that's anybody who uses chainsaws a lot on palms, they're the worst thing in the world to try and cut. They dull your chain quicker than anything else, other than sticking it into the dirt or some rocks or something like that. There's the way the fibers are and everything in palm trees, the way they're not like normal tree palms, not to get too technical with stuff. Plants mainly fall into two different categories, monocots and dicots. And monocots, which are what palms are, and bamboo, other things like that, grasses, inside the structure of their body, they have small single fibers like almost like a bundle of straws. And they also tend to have a lot of silica in there, which is sand and dirt and that sort of thing pulled up through there. So that's why when you start chainsawing on them, you get all this material that kicks out and it's nasty. The silicate is actually, which I didn't mention when I was talking about that devil's ivy, that's actually stuff called calcium oxalate that's in there. And it's basically a small silica that's in it. And when it comes out where you're cutting it, it's actually impacting the cells on your skin. It's basically cutting them open. It's like taking microscopic glass and dusting yourself with it. And that causes tissue damage. So that rash you're going to get from the devil's ivy is not the same stuff you're going to get from mangoes or anything that. So that's why that devil's ivy affects a lot of people, because if you get a batch on you and it's rubbed into your skin, you're doing stuff with your arms all day long and you're just rubbing it in more. It's like you took your, like I say, fiberglass or small glass particles and put it on your body and just rubbed it all in. And the more you rub it, the worse it's going to get. So, and it doesn't wash off too well. So, because it's already embedded in there. So you're going to have a rash for a little while with that one. Not a fun thing. Oh, that's another thing. A lot of people, I'm talking about poison ivy. People worry about infecting themselves more when they break out. You get those blisters and everything. And you'll hear people say, you pop the blisters, don't pop the blisters, do this, do that, and everything. It's better if you don't pop the blisters. You cannot reinfect yourself. There's no oil in the blisters. The blisters are just from the effect on your body. You can't infect your kids if you touch somebody and you got the blisters on your arm. I know a lot of people like to wrap them up and that sort of thing and all to make sure they don't touch anybody. The damage is already done once you're broken out. It's already there. So that breakout that you're looking at, the rash, the blisters and all, aren't going to infect anybody else. You don't have to worry about being on your bed and rolling over in the middle of the night. And oh, 2 blisters broke last night. I got to change all the sheets and hose everything down. It's not like that. You're not going to infect others. But
all right, well, folks, I don't want to hog out all night.
About
Scott?
popping the blisters, a lot of people say pop the blisters. I heard that for a long time. Hopefully, nobody does that anymore,
I think our
especially in
nurses
case
probably say
you
no
guys
on
on.
that. Yeah.
If you pop those blisters and you're going out working the next day, you're just opening your skin up to an infection. So don't pop blisters either.
Well, I don't know about y'all, but I'm not leaving my house for at least 5 days. Just gonna stay right here. Call Uber Eats. Scott, thank you so much again for joining us, and everything on behalf of Team Rubicon and everybody that's here. Your knowledge and the way you present, we're so much appreciated. We always learn a lot. So thank you for joining us again this year, Scott.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. You guys have a wonderful evening, and hopefully I don't see you soon for hurricane season.
There you go.
Good night.
Real. Y'all take it easy.
Have a good night.
Thanks again.